Oh, Jonathan.
Oh, hi Jim.
What have you been up to?
Oh, nothing too much. Cut the front off an airliner, stuffed it in the garage, connected the controls to a computer, and now I can fly it like a flight simulator.
Well, that's nice. You did what? Hello, it's Jim Lynn here. Welcome back to the workshop. Except it's not my workshop. I'm in the workshop of Jonathan Scrimshaw. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, Jim.
Welcome to the channel.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? What do you do for a living?
So, predominantly, I'm the first officer on the Embraer 190, which is a small regional jet, essentially.
Yeah, now I used to fly that before I was kicked out unceremoniously by COVID-19. Talking about small airliners, you've got an even smaller one, haven't you?
Yeah.
What kind is it?
So it's a British Aerospace Jetstream 41.
Right, so that's close to my heart because it's the first aircraft type that I flew. Way back in 1994 is when I started flying that, before you were born, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a good 4 years on that and absolutely loved it. It's a cracking aircraft to fly. So now you've got just the front end of a Jetstream 41, haven't you?
Yeah.
In your garage. How did you come to have the front end of a Jetstream?
One of those kind of sheer chance encounters. We had a couple out back where I used to work. They'd been parked up for about 10 years or so, and eventually the day came where they had to be scrapped. And I essentially intercepted the forward section of it before it went in the tip. Right,
so the guys were scrapping it and you went, hang on, can I have that? Basically.
Pretty much.
So you hired a trailer and transported it down here.
Yeah.
And it's not like you've got a big garage, have you?
No, it's not that big.
No. What size is it?
It's kind of single car garage. And when we say stuffed in the garage earlier, it really is.
It really is stuffed. Yeah. So we'll go and have a look at that later on. But for the moment, we're in Jonathan's workshop, where most of the work takes place to get this front end of an aircraft, which was a shell, really, wasn't it?
It was pretty stripped out even when we got it.
Yeah. And you've had to make instruments, haven't you?
We have made a lot from scratch.
And connect all the controls up to the computer.
Yeah.
Things like that. So we'll have a look at that and see how you did that. So let's have a look at the workshop first, will we?
Yeah, sounds good.
So this is your lathe, Jonathan. Where did you get it?
I bought it from a bloke in Cheltenham, I think. Not the best, but it didn't cost me very much, and it weighs an absolute ton. It can't do thread cutting, but it does have auto feed, which makes for quite a nice surface finish.
Have you made much with it?
To be honest, not as much as I thought I would use it for.
Yeah.
Nothing really for the simulator.
No, but it's there if you need it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, Jonathan, what on earth is this?
So this is a very small milling machine. This one was apprentice built, probably in the 60s.
So someone built this?
Someone built this, probably to prove they were worthy of being an engineer, but other than that, I know very little about it. Other than it is terrifying to use. So it's all unshielded up here, so don't put your fingers anywhere near it. So we've got a pillar drill, a bandsaw, which isn't working at the minute. I can't get the blade tension right. And then next to that we've got a belt sander.
Now you do have a 3D printer, don't you?
Yeah, it's one made by Ender. They're quite cheap, but I'd say it's probably the thing I've used the most.
We're at your bench now, and you've laid out some parts. What are these parts here then, and how have you made them?
So these bits are from the MD-80, which is an oldish airliner. These are from the overhead panel. So these control mostly the electrics and the fuel system for the aeroplane. Fuel tanks. This is the APU, the auxiliary power unit. And then over here, this is where you can pick your electrical source, so generators, APU.
And how did you make these?
So these are made out of laser cut sheet acrylic, which you then paint, and then it etches on a low power setting to get rid of the paint, which leaves you with the text.
So can you backlit this?
Yeah, if you shine a light through it, because it's clear essentially on the back, all the text will light up.
So it lights up through the white areas?
Yeah, but not through the paint. So this is for an even older aircraft, the Boeing 727. These bits are from the flight engineers panel. These essentially are for the fuel system.
So those look like Boeing colours?
Yeah, so that's Boeing brown, so it's from a 767. All of these are little keycaps which I had to make as well.
Right, so these are caps and they actually work the switches?
Yeah, there's these little momentary switches underneath.
Okay. So how did you make them?
So these are two front pieces of acrylic, which are then reverse engraved. So the etching is actually done on the back of the piece of text, which is why it's got a smooth finish to the top. But then they're just attached to another larger piece of acrylic with a little keyhole with a switch.
Do these have the lights in them?
No, so there's a hole there for an LED, so it will shine through from behind.
I see, right. This piece here, Jonathan, that's a real piece, isn't it?
Yeah, nearly 40 years old now, this piece.
Where does it come from?
It came from an XTWA 727.
727.
Yeah.
So why have you got that piece?
Well, I figured by getting one real piece, I can use it to scale up my replica pieces,
right,
get them to the correct size.
How do you create the plans then?
I try and find some form of image of a cockpit, preferably a cockpit poster, because they're orthographic.
And then you use that part to scale?
Yeah.
So you're getting 1-to-1 scale? I see, yeah.
So you can make sure they're exactly the same height, and then everything else just sort of falls into place. These two are slightly different designs, but they are the same
essentially the same panel.
Yeah. So this is called a K40 laser cutter. K40s are mass produced in China, so there's loads of different brands. Omtech are in the UK and they essentially retrofit them to be safer, generally better, and a warranty, which is the most important bit. So in my bed right now we've got a sheet of 3mm white acrylic, which I've then painted black.
This is the acrylic here?
Yeah. So we're now going to just cut out the acrylic and then etch in the text for some key rings. So this uses a CO2 laser, which is an invisible to our eyes anyway.
So the lasers...
The laser's actually in this bit back here.
Is it?
Yeah, and then there's a series of mirrors that reflect it.
What are all this grid area here, this mesh?
That's just essentially the worktop. It won't cut the metal. It can't cut metal, this. Now, I'm not an expert at laser cutters. I've only had this one about a month. I'm still very much learning the ways of doing good stuff. This screen is just connected up to an old office computer. This screen here is one of the bits of software you can use to actually control the laser cutter. So
that green bar tells us how much we've got to go, so it's almost done?
It's just done the etching and it's about to do the actual cut now.
Okay, let's see what we've got then. Right, so that's the result. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Okay, Jonathan, let's have a look. That is absolutely amazing. Okay, Jonathan, just describe this end of the aircraft.
So it used to be about a foot longer, but obviously you couldn't get around the sides of them when the doors were closed, so we angled round about a foot off. It didn't come with any floors, so we've just remade some out of MDF and some wood underneath it. The control runs were cut off here as well, along with all the wires, etc. And we've still got to trim a little bit more off the interior trim.
Yeah, did the seats come with it?
Yes, especially mouldy.
Especially mouldy seats?
Yeah, very mouldy.
Where were they?
They were in the aircraft. They've been sitting out with the airplane for about 10 years, however long it was.
Yeah. Okay, right, let's have a look inside then. Takes me back a few years walking in here. Now, Jonathan and Pete have now got this flight deck almost fully operational, and it's complete with seats, controls and instruments. But the amount of work required to get it to this stage is phenomenal, considering this is what it was like when it first arrived here. So everything had to be reinstalled, and if the part wasn't available, it had to be made. As an example, take the flight controls. Now, the original aircraft had internal position sensing of the main flight controls, although the controls themselves were still connected to the control surfaces with cables. Now, these sensors, these internal position sensors, are potentiometers, if you like, and they're in the floor under the control columns. But these can be used to tell the simulation software how the controls are being moved. Now, two of the sensors were still there from the original aircraft, one for the aileron and one for the rudder, but only the aileron still worked, but the elevator had nothing. So a new potentiometer and bracket were fitted for the rudder and a complete system for the elevator. Now, all of these are connected, because they're electrical, to Arduino boards, and those boards talk to the simulation software. Now this is right at the rear of the centre console between the pilots. The two large black knobs are the aileron trim and the rudder trim. Now actually these controls are rarely adjusted during normal flying apart from minor adjustments, but they're in constant use whilst flying on one engine, as any change in airspeed needs a change of trim setting. Now the other white control, it does work, and it's the flap control. Now this is basically a switch, this control, and it's connected to the simulation software via another Arduino board. Just forward of that is another panel with the word trim in it. Now this is to fine tune the autopilot when it's in basic mode. Now autopilots are normally used to hold something such as altitude hold, heading, speed, nav, but they can be used in a basic mode just to fly the aircraft, and this panel is the interface for that. So there's a wheel for going up and down, left and right. There's also some buttons for turning on and off the autopilot itself, AP, and the yaw damper, YD. And there's a button for bank limit. This does what it says in the tin. It reduces the maximum bank angle. You'd use that at low speed, especially whilst on one engine. And soft ride would be used in turbulence. Now further up from that is an indicator to show the position of the elevator trim. And just beyond that, there's two fire extinguisher selectors. There's one for each engine. Now this is quite an involved looking section, so we'll just take it from left to right. First there's the parking brake, self-explanatory. Then the manual elevator trim wheels, which as I said aren't functional at the moment. You can use them for making large inputs of elevator trim. These levers are the main power levers. Now you can see that on one of them there's the words go around. Now there's little buttons in there, and if you press those you get commands in the flight director to help you fly the go around. The aircraft won't fly it itself, you still have to apply the power and fly it, but the flight director at least gives you something to follow. Go arounds are usually surprises, so you need all the help you can get. Next to those are the propeller condition levers. Now there's basically three propeller conditions: the flight condition, the taxi condition, and the feather shutoff condition. In flight condition, the levers are used to set a fixed RPM, and the propeller blade angle adjusts according to power setting to maintain that RPM. In taxi condition, the propeller blade angle is fixed at a fine pitch, and the RPM changes according to power setting. This gives you precise control on the ground whilst taxiing. The feather shutoff condition is used in an emergency to shut down an engine in flight. This condition shuts off fuel and hydraulics and drives the propeller blades to the feather position, which gives minimum drag. These levers were still connected to their original cables which went to the engines, but of course the cables have been cut, so Jonathan and Peter found the cut ends and they added potentiometers to sense lever position, again through Arduinos to the sim software. Now I get that if you're not a pilot, all these panels can look confusing, but know this, they can be confusing for pilots too. So grouping knobs and switches and dials into sections according to system is normal for all aircraft, and this panel is a good example of that. Now there's 5 systems here, all outlined with a white box around each system group. Bottom left there's hydraulics, with some gauges for pressure and contents and some switches for pumps and valves. And on the right side there's air conditioning. From here you can adjust the amount of air drawn from the engines and the temperature of the air in the cabin and the flight deck. Above hydraulics and air conditioning there's 2 red T handles, more about them in a minute. In the middle, like an upside down L, is pressurization. That's next to air conditioning because the two are closely related. It's quite simple. Air conditioning controls how much air is going in and pressurization controls how it's let out. And by limiting that outflow with valves, you control the pressure. Now let's get back to those 2 red T handles. Now each pilot's control column controls only one elevator and one aileron, and underneath the floor there's bars connecting both control columns so that they work in sync. But supposing one of the control surfaces jams, well in that case pulling the appropriate T handle disconnects the 2 sides. So you can then find out which one's jammed and free up the other to continue flying. Now you'd need to fly carefully, but you'd get it down. Turning to the main panel now, let's look at the EFIS screens. EFIS stands for Electronic Flight Information System. Now these screens were missing, so Jonathan had to make them from scratch. Now the plastic surrounds or bezels, he 3D printed those, and then he just glued on some Raspberry Pi screens of various sizes. Now these screens plug straight into an avionics PC, which is networked with the main PC running the simulator. Now this tall central display, the ED or engine display, it has torque at the top, you set that with the power levers. Below that you've got exhaust gas temperature with interturbine temperature in the middle. And below that is the propeller RPM or rotational speed, and you set that with the condition levers. And finally at the bottom is fuel flow per engine and tank quantity. Either side of the engine display are the RMUs or radio management units. I've darkened these clips for sharper focus. So top left, COM1, that's for ATC voice frequencies. Top right, NAV1 is for navigation aids frequencies such as VORs and ILSs. In the middle, ATC TCAS has a transponder code in it on the left and ADF frequencies on the right. At the bottom you can set TCAS, Tactical Collision Avoidance System, display, range and modes. Now the little buttons along the sides are called LSKs or line select keys. Pressing the bottom key of each pair sets the cursor so that the numbers can be changed using the rotary knobs at bottom right. Then once the numbers are set, the top key of each pair toggles the numbers into use. Now all of these screens aren't exact representations of the real aircraft, and that's due to software limitations, but they're certainly pretty close. This screen is the absolute heart of the entire aircraft. This is called a PFD or primary flight display. The blue and brown ball in the middle shows the attitude of the aircraft, and it's the absolute key instrument the pilot uses to control the aircraft. Put simply, the blue is the sky, the brown is the ground, and the white horizontal line is the horizon. So think of this as a porthole looking forward. This black triangle with the yellow outline, that represents the aircraft as if you're behind it looking forward. This is called the reference aircraft. The apex of the triangle shows the aircraft position vertically with respect to the Earth's horizon, that's the white line, and the tips left and right show the position laterally. It's that simple but exceptionally complex to learn to use well. There are various markings for bank and pitch angles, and the tape on the left is airspeed, and the tape on the far right is altitude, and the vertical arc is vertical speed or rate of climb and descent in feet per minute. Now again, this isn't exactly like a Jetstream 41, but that's due to software limitations. Immediately below the PFD is the HSI or Horizontal Situation Indicator. Think of this as a porthole looking down through the floor at the ground. This is where most of the navigation information is displayed. So essentially this is a compass rose. Now this turns as the aircraft turns in the direction of turn, so that the direction the aircraft is pointing, known as its heading, is always shown under the upside down triangle at the very top. Now the blue bug nearby that triangle, well, that can be set to any heading for reference. It's known as the heading bug and is controlled by a knob elsewhere. You can see top right in blue that this bug is set to 238 degrees, and on the compass rose there's the actual bug just to the left of 240 degrees. The green information is all to do with navigation aids. This next panel, which is original, is the CWP or Caution and Warning panel. When I press this button, all the little lights illuminate so you can see if any have failed. Now under normal flight conditions this panel is completely dark, so if something does happen, a light coming on will immediately grab your attention, especially as it is usually accompanied by an oral warning. In this view you can also see the undercarriage lever and the flaps position indicator. Now Jonathan and Pete had to connect all of these little lights individually.
Flaps 9.
So what is this like to fly? Does it actually simulate a real aircraft? Well, the answer is an emphatic yes. Jonathan and Pete have done a fantastic job getting this up and running, and believe me, it's taken an immense amount of work to achieve.
What sort of speed takeoff? About 100? 120?
About 90, I think, yeah.
90?
So have a look at me actually flying it. This is my first attempt. This is runway 23 right at Manchester Airport. As you can see here, and particularly during the landing later, the graphics are insanely good. So you can see I'm not tracking the centre line very well, and this is because I'm very rusty after over 4 years away from this, and I'm trying desperately hard not to over control. In addition, as we get airborne, you can see that slight porpoising in pitch. Both of those piloting issues are a combination of mainly being out of practice, but also something called latency. Now, to explain what latency is, let's go over a few things about simulators in general. Simulators are excellent at replicating switches, instruments, lights, levers, all that kind of stuff, but where simulators can never be quite perfect is replicating how the real aircraft feels to fly. By that I mean the apparent response of the aircraft to a control input. In a real aircraft, the time difference between the pilot moving a flying control and the control surface actually moving in response is so short that it can't be felt. But that's impossible to replicate in a simulator, no matter how powerful the computer. You see, in the simulator, when you move a flying control, you generate an electrical signal, and that then has to travel to a computer, then has to get processed, and then a request sent back to instruments, visuals, etc. to display to the pilot what they've done. Now this has a little lag. It's tiny, it's milliseconds, but it is there, and most pilots can feel it. That's latency. This latency isn't there in the real aircraft, and it causes a couple of minutes of over-controlling when a pilot first comes back to the simulator after 6 months flying the real thing. So here we are coming back into land on runway 23 right at Manchester, around 200 feet up at the moment. As you can see, the graphics are absolutely amazing. Now you can see that I'm moving the aircraft around quite a lot. I'm desperately trying not to. Now, this is a combination of being well out of practice, also the latency of the simulator. But remember, an aircraft's control surfaces need to be displaced by far larger amounts at such low speeds that are found during takeoff and landing.
30, 20, 10.
Well, it was all going fine until I selected reverse. I think if I did that in the real aircraft, I'd be getting tea and biscuits in the chief pilot's office. The problem with maintaining the centre line on the first takeoff we identified as just over controlling with the rudder pedals. So after taxiing around for a while to try and get that muscle memory to kick back in, here's takeoff number 2.
Call it rotate, will you?
Okay. V1, rotate. Pause to climb.
Gear up.
Yeah. Gear up.
Well, that was a significant improvement. I think the human brain's amazing that even after 4 years away from this, it didn't take that long for all these skills to come back. Now let's have a look at the second approach and landing.
Localizer capture.
Check. The approach to max.
Glide slope capture.
What's the flat limit?
about 150, I think.
Right, flaps 9. And gear down.
Yeah.
Now that we're using the Instrument Landing System, or ILS, rather than the visual approach that we did last time, there's much better centerline tracking. 10 knots, 600 feet.
Hey, 100 above.
Check. A little bit of an over control input just here upset things at the last minute, but so far it's much better. Way off to the side again, it's these rudder pedals, that's what's doing it. Oh.
10. Smooth.
Well, I'm sure if I could invest a few more hours practice in this simulator, I'd have that nailed. Talking about hours and hours of practice, here's Peter flying. Now Peter is an experienced pilot in the general aviation sector, and in this segment he's demonstrating the excellent handling qualities of the Jetstream 41. This is the Grand Canyon.
Thank you. 203. 203.
Now the callouts you can hear in the background, such as bank angle, too low terrain and sink rate, well, those are from the Ground Proximity Warning System, or GPWS, and if you heard any of those in normal flying in a real aircraft, particularly too low terrain, you would immediately take some emergency corrective action.
Sink rate.
It's Jonathan's turn now, and here he is taking off from London City Airport. Now Jonathan is an experienced airline pilot, and like Peter, he's put in hundreds of hours in this simulator. In this segment we're showcasing the excellent graphics models that are available. thumbs up and subscribe, especially so that you don't miss out on the full 8-minute uncut version of this London flight, and also the full 9-minute version of Pete's flight through the Grand Canyon, both coming soon on this channel. Now, Jonathan and Pete are working towards offering experience sessions to the public on this simulator, so I'll keep you posted as that comes to fruition. Well, I think you'll agree, everyone, that was absolutely immense fun. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Mr. Lynn's Workshop. Don't know if you noticed me banging my head on the door.